All right, guys, welcome to the show. Today we have a guest who I really enjoy the company of. And, as a chiropractor, I've been doing this for around 28 years. A lot of people will come to me and ask, hey, Dr. Mike, you think I'd be a good chiropractor? Sometimes a young student or a young, person will be in my office for a few years, treating the whole family. And they think, hey, you got kind of a cool job. I think I might want to do that. And, sometimes I think to myself, that person, I think they have what it takes. That person seems to have the general nature of someone who, wants to be in the healing arts or is curious by nature or loving enough. And other times, it's not so much that, and I always try to give, very constructive advice to people when they want to get in this profession, because if it isn't for you, it's a lot of work. And if it is for you, it's like a vacation. I mean, it's such an enjoyable thing to do. And who I have on the show today, I met, and I couldn't be more happy to be, in a sense, at some point, passing the torch to this gentleman. You see that I feel like at this point, I'm like a steward to the profession, right? I'm part of the reputation of this profession. So what I do and what I say reflects onto chiropractors as a whole to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of us, but we all add to the story of what is chiropractic today. Where is it going? Where does it come from? But this young doctor is the epitome of who I would pass the torch to and say, okay, it's my turn to hang back a little, and why don't you go run with this thing, because you're in the next generation of it. And so I just want to introduce to you today Dr. Kevin Levandoski. He is a chiropractor, freshly out of school, and doing fantastic. I'm sure he and I've been speaking over the last couple of years, and we get together and we just put our heads together and start talking philosophy and healing and all those sort of things. So welcome, doctor.
Holy cow. Thank you. I appreciate that. My favorite thing you said was it's a vacation. I couldn't
Well,
agree more. It's so much fun doing this, isn't it?
yeah, well, when you're meant to do something like you are, you're meant to do this, and I honestly don't say that to everybody. I just kind of leave it out. Some people sort of are meant to do it. Other people, it feels like a job, but it's a profession. And if it feels right and you go to work and the time flies by, I mean, is it challenging? Yeah, it's challenging. People come in with every imaginable ailment to chiropractors, right? Sometimes it's simple low back pain. Other times it's something that everybody has failed to figure out. The neurologist can't figure it out. And they start wondering, is it on the emotional plane? Is this person have an allergy or some kind of, immune system that's really making it confusing? Because I think one of the things we're going to learn this year, if we haven't already, is how complex the immune system is, and the many faceted connections that we have to it, from our diet to our thoughts to our physical movements, and how all of that interplays into the immune system. I've been in love with the mystery of the immune system for my entire profession, and before that, because I had some miserable allergies as a kid. A lot of my viewers know I had migraines. That's what sent me to the chiropractor. And that reminds me of when I asked my chiropractor if I would make a good chiropractor, because he fixed my migraines, and I think I want to do this. I wonder if he's going to like tell me, you're not going to be able to do it, son. You don't have what it takes, But he's like, no, I think you'd be great at it. He was in practice so many years that he referred me to his daughter, who was just about ready to graduate from chiropractic college at the time, and said, I'm kind of the old thing. Why don't you go talk to my daughter? She knows what's going on now, And of course I did. And, then the story after that is I became a chiropractor. So let's get to know you a little bit. So why did you become a chiropractor? I really don't even know the full story.
Oh, yeah. Well, I played ball in college and just terribly unhealthy. I mean, you name it. Spiritually, I was unhealthy. Physically, I was not doing well. Like, you work out every day, but there's only so much that will do to combat things that you're doing outside of that, whether it's diet, like you were talking about, or thoughts and anything like that. So, I mean, I was pretty mangled. And my last game as a senior playing ball, I was carried off in stretcher.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I completely blew out a disc. Just couldn't move. It was terrifying. It really was. I had so many shots. I think in one time I went to the doc and got 16 shots in one session. We got cortisone, got epidurals, you name it. I did it. PT all the time, and nothing was really working. So I ended up getting surgery on it. on my back, and they told me if I didn't, I'd potentially never be able to play with my kids when I had those. I mean, it shakes you to your bones, right?
Yeah.
So finally, I found a chiropractor, and that wasn't even it for me. They helped me so much, but in that moment, I wasn't thinking this is it. I want to be a chiropractor. It took like a year or so later. I was in Colorado with a buddy of mine who's from a chiropractic family. Both his brothers are chiropractors. His dad's a chiropractor. So we were driving through the mountains listening to Reggie Gold.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And for those of you who don't know, Reggie Gold's just an old school philosopher since passed. His wife still lives. But so we're listening to him, and he was giving his Valley of the Blind speech that he gave to the graduation at Palmer. And this guy hit me so sideways. It was at a point in my life where I had a desk job. The dent in my forehead was getting so big from banging my head against the desk. I was just still unhappy. You know what I mean? So I started to like reevaluate life and how I want to live, and started making decisions for myself consciously instead of just kind of floating. And the way I wanted to live ended up aligning so well with this old guy with mutton chops was telling me in the car. You know what I mean? And in that moment, it just kind of struck me that this is what it is. Not only did I have this personal experience with chiropractic helping me so much, but at a deeper, more philosophical core level, it hit me. And I quit my job like 2 weeks later and joined school.
Oh, that's a great story. I love when it's so often that someone has to go into the depths and dark misery of existence to then rise up like a phoenix from the flames. You have something that just says, okay, here's the way. This is what I'm going to do with my life now, and it's almost as if that misery like strips away all the static, and you really start to look for something that is gonna occupy you. I like the idea that chiropractic is a lifestyle. Other people are like, well, I have my job and then I have my life, and they're very separate. And it's not a career. It's not even an occupation. It's a job. It makes money, whatever. What attracted me to this career is the better person I became, the better chiropractor I became, and vice versa. I really like the idea that I was going to be encouraged to be the highest version of myself, because that would make me a better healer. That would make me more like the great healers that have walked the face of the earth. The closer I can get to them, the better person I'm going to be, the better life my children can be better, and my relationships will be better in my life. And so that was just, something that really sold me on wanting to be a chiropractor, because my chiropractor was that way.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it. The more people realize that you can't separate things. Everyone thinks I can buy stocks in a crappy, shady company, but that's just money. That doesn't have anything to do with the other parts of my life. They think they can categorize all these different things in their lives, and you can't split oneness, right? Yeah. There's one life. Everything you do is encompassed within that. You can't say I do this here and that here. So like you're saying, being a better person and a better chiropractor, yeah, spot on, exactly the same thing.
You're the direct related, because I think if you want someone to heal, you want a healing environment. And to me, that environment starts inside me, and it comes from my heart and my words. And it doesn't, and it can also be part of my office, the setting, but it really comes from the place that I'm coming from. What do I want to know about? How do I have to get inside this person's head to figure out where did they steer wrong? What thought or what behavior, and lovingly get them back on track, bring them back to themselves, bring them back to what they're meant to do. One of the things that I'm always challenged by is the definition of natural, right? And like you can look at things a couple different ways. Like I thought to myself, well, I looked up one definition and I actually kind of laughed. It said existing in or caused by nature, not caused by humankind. I thought that was a really bizarre definition. So in other words, anything I do, because I'm part of humankind, is not natural. I think that's a horrifying definition. I'm so happy I found it, because I thought that is a controversial thing to say, that anything caused by humankind is not natural. And I thought of a really bizarre example. I go hiking in the Rockies a lot, and a lot of times you see the droppings of animals, right? You can see big bear poop or something, and you think to yourself, wow, there it is, there's this food, and that's the digested remains. And I thought, well, if I had to go to the bathroom in the woods And I did the same thing. By this definition, what I left behind would not be natural, even if I ate nothing but organic food, right? So I thought that's really terrible. So give us some idea of a better definition of natural than everything nature does and everything man does is unnatural, you know?
Well, isn't that interesting that I did say that? That speaks to the human desire to remove themselves from nature. Like
Yes.
even the
Well
definition of
put.
natural, I'm taking myself out of this.
All
Like that
right.
makes no sense. It makes
Yeah,
no sense.
we're not natural by our intrinsic being somehow according to, and that's the first definition that came up. That was number one. I didn't go down to number six. That's number one.
Number 6 might be a little better.
It gets better. Well, let me go with number two. In
Let's go.
agreement with the character or makeup of or circumstances surrounding someone or something. So in agreement with the character of. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Right? To be natural, to be in agreement with the character of, to be in the surroundings that agree with you. That number two is so much better than number one.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It is a difficult question though. When I saw that you had it on there, it is difficult. And my first thing that came to mind was similar to what that first definition minus the second part. I wouldn't take humanity out of it, but something that occurs in nature tends to be natural. But as we saw with the second part of that definition, it gets muddy so quick, right? Like you have trees and you have water, which can be said to be natural. But if you build a log cabin with running water, that might not necessarily be natural, even though it uses these elements that are found in nature.
Well, like a bird's nest. A bird's nest is natural. It was built by the bird using straw. So it's natural. But if I use wood and build a log cabin, like you're saying, somehow that's an unnatural existence. And it's not. It's done by man. And since when are we unnatural? Right? So,
yeah.
And the reason I pick on this and I bring this up is because when someone says natural healthcare, I think to myself, okay, where do we draw the line on natural healthcare? What is it? How natural is it? And chiropractic, is it natural? What's natural about chiropractic?
Yeah, amazing. It's such a muddy question, the first one, right? That you could talk about it for days, because where is the line? Where does it go too far? Where does aluminum and mercury, which you can find in nature, turn into the things that we're using it for now? You know what I mean? But is chiropractic natural? I love that, because I think chiropractic, it doesn't add anything, right? Chiropractic's not about gaining, it's about removing the interference to what is naturally inborn. You know, we chiropractors, we call it innate intelligence, the innate wisdom. And a lot of people don't like that. They actually prefer to call it nature, the inborn wisdom of the body. And I appreciate that. And that's what I think about is so natural about chiropractic, is we're looking to find that full expression of who you naturally are. And we're not looking to add anything into your system, which I really appreciate about chiropractic.
No, I think that makes a very good point. One of the things I always added to that is that motion is so natural, and we're putting motion into fixation or disturbance or lack of motion or improper positioning leading to lack of motion. And that putting more motion into something, in a sense, is adding to the life of the individual. And then it's allowing that nerve to conduct properly to every cell and back to the brain and back and forth. So in a sense, that the natural part for me also is the motion, because think about how healthy movement is and how necessary.
For sure. What doesn't move? Something that's dead, right? And
Rock.
even that, it moves at a great deal of things, but yeah, motion is life.
Things have different energies to them. There are people that get into crystals and gems, and there are there are people that get into sort of a quantum model that things that don't move might have a sense or a definition of life, but it's really far away from the type of life that humans live. Our life is dependent on movement. The mammalian life, in most, in the animal kingdom, most things are moving. In the plant kingdom, they're moving. I one time saw an amazing time-lapsed photographs in a time-lapse movie, I guess you'd say, of two different species of vines growing up the side of a building. And they fought each other. They actually had like this battle for light and for space that really looked like two people almost sword fighting. the branches would come apart, then they'd come together, wind around each other, then look at each other, and then come back and wind around. And they both existed. No one really won. It was almost like they were both competing, but saying, you can exist, but I want more light. You can exist, but I want more light. I want more space. And it was that fight for survival in one sense. But to think that a plant would have that ferocity within it, but it's happening so slow relative to how we view time. And you talk about, how plants and animals differ. That was one of the things that brought us together. It really looked like a battle going on. It's pretty amazing stuff, So one of the things I always knew about you is that you're interested in the founder and the founder's son of chiropractic, BJ and DD Palmer. And most people don't really spend much time thinking about the history of chiropractic, at least patients don't. And I think a lot of doctors don't, a lot of chiropractors don't. And they might know the names, but they don't know the stories. And I always said that the history of chiropractic would make the most amazing movie because it's filled with such drama and such struggle and such genius. And to be able to bring up a profession in a time when the pharmaceutical industry was also coming up, and to be able to differentiate yourself from that very powerful entity that was occurring, and to survive that took audacity. I mean, it took genius and a fight. So give viewers some ideas about the history of chiropractic, how you see it and how it came up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I spent a lot of time, a lot of people dedicating their lives to that exact question. And it is amazing. I go back to Cicero. I like this quote. It's written, John Wolfe. You remember John Wolfe from Northwestern?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dadder's grandfather, I can't remember, founded Northwestern. And John's an attorney, and he's also a DC, and he's the chief editor of the Chiropractic History magazine. So a quote that he puts in his editor's note every time is a quote by Cicero saying that those who do not know what happened before they were born will remain forever a child. I believe it's a quote. That's kind of how I look at chiropractic history, where I believe for practice members or patients, like if they're that interested in chiropractic, they'd probably be chiropractors to learn the history.
Yeah, sure.
But for chiropractors, I think it's very important to know what happened before us because it's still occurring today. You brought up the AMA fights that chiropractors had, which are still going on. I don't know if you saw in Texas, the chiropractors just won a case down there where the AMA was trying to take out anything neurological from the chiropractor scope.
Wow. And you think about what would be, you look at the motivation of doing that, and it's so obviously a poor motivation. It's a greedy type of thing. It has nothing to do with skill sets. It has nothing to do with what's better for the patient. That has so much to do, in my mind, with simply wanting to dominate more ground to produce more patients that will take more drugs. I mean, that's all I see. I'm sorry. I wish I could see a better motivation there, but it's clear to me that that's what they're into.
Yeah, I have a mentor that says it's either evil or ignorant, and he chooses to see it in a better light and claim ignorance on that. But and I like that. But yeah, it's hard to look at, and the two ideas are so opposing. Which one's an outside in philosophy, right? We're trying to remove that to allow the natural abilities of the body to express themselves to the fullest, compared to the suppression of symptoms. I mean, it's two completely different states of mind that I don't know if they really have a choice but to kind of fight, to be honest with you. I mean, it could be a lot better now, but they're almost complete opposites. But in regards to how we got to where we are, who are BJ and who's DD, I mean, that's like a mysterious question. It would make it incredible. I want, was it Walter Isaacson, the guy that does all the famous biographies on Da Vinci, Ben Franklin? If he got his hands on BJ Palmer or DD Palmer, I think that would be the most interesting books of all time, at least in my opinion. But these were just simple people who were genius and ornery and had all the human characteristics that we all do. DD was a guy from a small town in Canada who decided to come to Iowa and plant some roots in Davenport. He was a magnetic healer, a spiritualist, which if you look into those two things, chiropractic has a lot of similarities to and a lot of differences in, but you can tell that he definitely had influences in those realms. And through his magnetic healing work, he started figuring out these different things that ended up turning into chiropractic. He said, I believe he said magnetic or chiropractic is an evolution of magnetic healing. I can't remember exactly how I put it, but basically that he took magnetic healing and brought it to a different realm and made it a completely separate profession, which is chiropractic. And then, I mean, he was just an ornery guy, difficult to get along. And he kind of had to be. He didn't even get along with his own son in many circumstances. But then you had this son, BJ, who ended up just being kind of an odd kid. You can read a lot of the green books. He tells stories about his childhood. Some of those, whether they're true or not, are up for debate after people look into them. But he was just a weird kid, and he ended up taking hold and really embodying this philosophy that his dad laid out, and he ran with it. And he went tooth and nail. He's a brilliant man. He got his hands into the biggest advertisers. Like, he had a huge radio station, the WCC, I believe, I don't know, someone can correct me on that. But he just had his hands in so many different things, and he was so brilliant that he succeeded at so much. Yeah,
I think they both wore a lot of different hats. I was impressed that they were cutting edge in ideas of healing. And at the time, there were charlatans, snake oil salesmen, people that represented themselves very falsely. And in that world, there he was really trying hard to come at the true basis of what heals people and the rhythms of the body, and looking at Chinese medicine, which was 5,000 years old. He wasn't making things up as he went along. He was very much extrapolating from the data that he was able to get his hands on. And the two are very different people, like you're saying. I had read, I didn't realize this until much later, that there was a discussion whether chiropractic was going to be a religion or not. And I think it was D.D. Palmer that violently opposed the idea, because he said Christian Scientists had that sort of like health and religious thing. And he didn't want to be confused with that, even though there's a philosophy and a series of rules and ideas, and a great respect for this innate intelligence, which almost, has overlay in what a lot of people define as the creative energy of God and the direction of a higher force. So you start, starting to sound like it's a faith. I always tell people it's not a faith, it's a science, an art, and a philosophy. Those three branches together. I don't see it as a faith. People will say, I don't know if I believe in chiropractic. And I'm like, what is there to believe? It's a structure function model of physics at this point. In the beginning, maybe there was a lot of faith to be able to pursue it. But my favorite way of demonstrating chiropractic, I said it's structure and function. And then people go, oh, they're kind of like, don't know what that means. And the simple example, take a round wheel off a car, make it square, and put it back on the car, right? You just change the structure and you just change the function. Now it can't roll, it hops because it has four sides instead of a nice circle. And that's really what I'm concerned with. I'm looking at the four-sided people that are coming in and trying to get them to be a circle, right?
That's good.
You think about it, we really are three half circles in our spine, right? The lumbar curve, the middle back curve, and the neck curve are like three wheels sort of sitting on top of each other. And, they act as shock absorbers, as you know, but they're kind of wheel-like. They have an arc, and any squared off vertebra in there, and I don't mean square meaning level, I mean square like the square wheel, can cause a problem with the rolling. And the rolling to me is the kinetic chain dynamics, which, that's what, for listeners that don't know what that is, it's simple. It's heel strike and the absorption of shock all the way through your spine. Good kinetic translation or force moving through your spine with fluidity feels good. Everything else feels awkward over time. So, and I liked the idea that BJ and D.D. Palmer had unpopular opinions. I have friends of mine that are just kind people and sweet people, and they're just not good at having unpopular opinions. They're very agreeable, and they're wonderful people, and they can be healers. They can do a million things in life, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I always get a kick out of someone who doesn't mind having an unpopular opinion. I have a few unpopular opinions, and they get me in trouble. And and I'm willing to change them if someone can prove me wrong. That's great. I love the discussion. I don't get angry. I get fascinated when someone challenges a belief that I have, especially a core belief. I'll get excited, but by no means am I going to start, turning it into a Jerry Springer show. I mean, that's like the most disturbing thing of human nature I could think of, or anything like that. Like CNN News has turned into Jerry Springer, in my opinion. So I like a good discussion with calm, intelligent people referencing real truth and facts, and then their own personal experience. And to me, that's a great discussion. And that's what I hope these podcasts are.
I think they are. You're very good at that. And I think one of the reasons you're good at that too is because it comes from a place of depth where your unpopular opinions, which I'm sure I've heard many of them over Christmas get-togethers, but they come from logical deductions. It's not some whim you're spewing out trying to force someone to think like you because you want to create little mini mics everywhere.
Right.
It's something thought out, put a lot of hard work into, and you're saying, all right, here it is. Tell me your side, and let's all kind of get together.
I don't know where it comes from, but I literally get excited when I find someone that opposes my way of thinking. I think it's fun. Let's have an interesting conversation. I mean, we had all three of our daughters naturally. My wife is like a superhero, and she, through our own knowledge and the Bradley method of childbirth, we had our babies without any anesthesia, any drugs at all. And there are people that think we are hippies, risk takers, unnecessarily we're crazy charlatans, and even to the point of calling me foolish for having a child without medical intervention, and taking some big risk and all this kind of thing. And I love those discussions because you can back up natural childbirth many times with medical childbirth and some of the monkey wrenches that medicine can throw into a natural birth. And for anybody, wondering, do I believe that a medical birth is necessary? Sometimes it is. Things can go wrong, right? But when you really understand how birthing works, the natural childbirth is the best for everybody involved. That's my opinion, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And that gets back to your first question, what is natural, right? We have these opposing thought processes that think one way is that nature is always the smartest. Nature always knows the best to do it naturally. And then we have this really kind of mainstream thought process that the educated brain is always best. So we think that our educated intellection can override nature. So let's make all these different ways that we can interfere with the natural process to try to make it better. And that just doesn't happen. Reggie Gold would say nature needs no help, just no interference. So if you want to add all these interventions into something that isn't an emergency, you can't improve upon nature.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you caveated that by saying that isn't an emergency. Because when someone hears some of my natural beliefs, they would think maybe I wouldn't go to the ER if I had acute appendicitis. If I was having a heart attack, I'd rub liniment on my chest and start, walking backwards or something. Not at all. Not at all. There's a time when what has hit the fan, and it's time to get invasive, right? But to get invasive too early, you're basically creating a shift in the rhythms of the body that is most likely not going to end too well, and is going to escalate into, oh my God, now we really have to get invasive because you messed with the beginning of the process.
For sure. You wouldn't call the fire department if you didn't have a fire in your house.
Right.
They come in, dirty boots, they're going to axe down your walls, right? But if there's a fire, you're not going to call anyone but the fire department. So by calling the fire department, you're really tearing up your insides a little bit for the purpose of restoring the overall, keeping your life. Right. But if there's no fire, you don't need that. You're tearing up your insides for no reason.
Right. That fire analogy is pretty good because you think about how inflammation, in a sense, is a fire in your body. And to keep that inflammation reasonable, you want to do healthy things. The diet, exercise, your thoughts, the usual stuff that we talk about. But if the fire is blazing out of the windows, like you say, it is time to call the fire department. You're not putting that out. That's just going to burn down. So we want to stay, healthy. One of the things that a lot of people, I think, want to hear more about, or certainly don't understand, is what the chiropractic adjustment is. And we touched on it a little bit earlier, but to me, I look at it as a force applied to the body to wake up a stagnant physiology, so then it comes back to being reset or paid attention to. Like, I want the neural attention to that stagnant, stuck, swollen, fixated area where there's not enough flow. I've always said that, stagnation is the only disease and flow is the only cure. And most diseases, every disease I could think of has a stagnating component to it. And the cure has to do with getting that stagnation to flow. So when you're assessing a patient, for example, and then you apply an adjustment. Give me some ideas of what you're looking for and why you think that's valuable to do an adjustment.
Oh, that's great. I love your stagnation talk. I heard you and Fred talking about that quite a bit, Fred Clary. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's brilliant because with the work that I do, a lot of it's more low force, a lot of it's more tonal instead of structural. So what we're looking for is different patterns. What pattern are you stuck in? What pattern is stagnated, basically, in your body? And these patterns are controlled by your nervous system. I mean, every cell and organ and everything in your body is controlled by that. We know that. So the whole point of my analysis on why I adjust and where I adjust is to find out where these stuck patterns in your nervous system are that aren't allowing you to be adaptable to the best of your capabilities. So if your brain controls everything and it's hardwired to go to every cell and back up and communicate, if there's a roadblock in that, that's an issue. That's a stagnation. That's a blocked pattern. So where can we apply a chiropractic adjustment or a force to remove these interferences and allow your body to express at its fullest potential? So really, it's a life thing. It's not even about a disease. It's not even about anything. It's about how are you expressing who you are? And if you're not doing that, you're stuck.
You mentioned the word disease, and I always thought it was interesting when you take the two words and you separate that word into two. It's dis-ease, a lack of ease. And I don't know if it's Palmer that started that or if that's the true definition, if you go back to the actual definition of the word, but a lack of ease is dis-ease. And when something is diseased, you want to create an ease to it. One of the ways of doing that would be, in a sense, to massage it or to stimulate it or to wake it up or to bring it to motion. Because you think how hard it is to be static and how hard it is to be perfectly still. If I said, okay, stop breathing, slow your heart down, and don't move, don't blink, that stillness, you couldn't sustain that for very long without just dropping over. So much, that's like a global stillness, a global stagnation. So imagine if you did, like 2% of that, because your life is in a fear state or your life is in a stuck pattern. And then that body then mimics the mind. So for me, I always try to get into the person's head a little bit and get to, as you get to know your patients. Dr. Bill Metler and I talked about the relationships chiropractors have with our patients. And it's such a luxury that we have that medical doctors don't often have the opportunity to create because of the segmented nature and all the high-tech toys and all the other stuff. Chiropractors get to know their patients because of the repetitious nature. We give a treatment by hand in person. A medical doctor gives an exam and then advice, and then a drug is the treatment, let's say. So they take their pill every day, and that unfortunately gets in the way of that person's relationship with that doctor, which could be an amazing opportunity to have a great relationship, where we have the luxury, and I really mean that, to see that person even if it's 5 minutes, 10-minute visits, adds up over time, and pretty soon you have these relationships that help you diagnose that patient because you know them. It's much easier to understand when someone's out of their phase. Think of a mother, looks at a child, a 10-year-old child, and says, you look a little pale. Well, why do they know that? Because this is their child. It's been 10 years of raising this child. They know the skin tone of that child, and they know something isn't right. And that becomes how, in a sense, what it's like to have patients for years. When something's not right. And it's such a great, and it helps with diagnosis.
Yeah, and it goes to creating that healing environment you were talking about as well. How comforting is it to know that I'm going into the office today to see Dr. Mike Christopher, who I've been going to for 10 years. He knows about my family. He sees my kids. It's such a comforting experience and just a healing environment that you're talking about that can really be beneficial. It is a luxury.
Yeah, and I always tell people that, I'm going to stay current. I'm not going to let, the world roll past me and rest on my laurels. I stay well read. And if someone asks me a question I don't know the answer to, I'm happy to say, I don't know that. I don't know I don't know. And then sometimes they're like almost disappointed, like they think I know everything. And that's a wonderful compliment, but absolutely ridiculous. And I said, but I'll get back to you on that. Because I don't really want to speak, I don't want to guess at this one, because that's a very specific question. And there was I never thought of it. That's really, sometimes there's some of the greatest questions. You think, wow, how come I never put that together? I should have looked that up. And then you come back next week, a little scrap of paper in my pocket. I'm like, oh, well, let me check. Well, and then we have a nice talk about it, which keeps me sharp, gives them information to go with. Because let's face it, right now, you look something up on the internet, and you have too many answers. And then you have the biased answers, who knows what the real, who's driving this information. When I just Google something, who decides what comes up first? Mitch, who helps me put these series together, he's someone that kind of knows the answer to that, because he's very versed in that kind of world. And I look to him once in a while, and we have these in-depth discussions about where is our data coming from, and what is the priority of who's giving this to us. I sometimes will ask Google questions that are quite challenging, and just against what I think their sort of motivations are, just to have fun and see what they say to me. But
yeah, I mean, when you reach into infinity, you're going to find what you're looking for. Google's kind of that infinite black hole of, if you search something, you're going to find someone who's going to cater to what you're trying to find.
Yeah, my daughter and I got in discussion about, is caffeine a stimulant or not? And she said it wasn't, and I said it was. And by the time we got done, it took a while. But really what it does is it somehow occupies the chemistry of fatigue, so you don't feel your fatigue. So technically, you can look this up. It's kind of interesting. It doesn't really stimulate something. It really just stops the fatigue chemistry from being recognized, which,
wow.
is kind of a stimulus, but it's not. It's different how other things would wake you up. Other chemicals would wake you up. And but it took, wow, we went online, and I kept reading stuff and looking for biases and saying, who wrote this article? And by the time we got done, because, I don't like to be wrong, and neither does she. She is my daughter. She doesn't like to be wrong. Where'd you get that from? We do welcome it when it really happens, which, once in a while. But it was a great discussion and a great way of, sort of seeing what's out there and challenging our the latest research on it. Like what is caffeine? Because caffeine's natural. We can get into what's natural with that one, right?
Yeah.
Your soda pop isn't natural, I can tell you that. But coffee, I don't know. It's a bean. And I'm not the biggest coffee drinker. I'm not sticking up for coffee in any bizarre way. But tell me this. Give me 3 sort of like elements of a healthy lifestyle. Because we talk about lifestyle management, it's like a buzz term. We talk about the chiropractic lifestyle. And when we had Dr. Brittany Stamer on, she brought up this cool thing about community. That was one I wouldn't have thought of. If you let me sit there for a few hours and said, give me all this healthy stuff, I would have, even though I know it, I wouldn't have been able to write it down. And I really thank her for that getting a community of supporting people that are like-minded around you was part of a healthy lifestyle. And I've been saying that to patients ever since. Because it's just something I left out of my sort of my diction. So give me some. I think viewers like to have like 3 things they can sort of take with them. What do you think if you think about 3 healthy lifestyle things?
For sure. Yeah. First of all, Brittany's brilliant. So is Brienne. They have a natural draw to making sure their community is what it needs to be to support who they are, and it's amazing, right. Really.
I agree.
Yeah. The 3 I would say, though, is what are you doing for your body? What are you doing for your mind? What are you doing for your soul? I think I'd go broad scope like that, because people are so different that what feeds you isn't necessarily going to feed me. Yeah. So I like to bring up my grandma. She's going to be 95 in May, and she just had a compression fracture a little bit ago. So this has gone down a little bit, but she reads ferociously. And does Sudoku, right? So that's mind. Wow. She worked out an hour a day all these years. That's more than I do. So that's her body. And then her soul, she does a daily devotional for her chosen religion every day. Wow. I'm like, right there is exactly what I'm talking about. Wow. Is she has at least one thing that's nurturing all those aspects of who she is. And it could be all 3 are tied up into one, right? I'm sure when you're on a bike ride, all 3 of those are encompassed when you get in that zone. So it doesn't have to be separate things, but I think you need to make sure that you're touching upon all 3 of them.
I think that's great. And I did get a chance to meet your grandmother, and she's one of those people that as soon as you look at her, you're just drawn in, because she's not 25 years old, but at the same time, you're like, how could she be so vital as well? I mean, she looks great. I mean, you wouldn't guess her age either. But I guess what I'm saying is, you look at it and you say, this is an older woman, but oh my God, she's got opinions. She's moving around really well. Her color is good. She's well dressed. I mean, I'm like, I didn't know it was your grandmother when I first met her. I just saw this woman, in the crowd. And I thought, well, and I kind of like wanted to walk closer to her and hear what she had to say because, I mean, I really get a kick out of especially older women's opinions because they are done holding it in. They are done. In that era that your grandmother was raised, possibly she was told that, maybe keep quiet or, it's a man's world or whatever. God only knows. I don't know if she ever lived that life, but, certainly she was living in that era. And you just love when they get to the age where it's like, you know what? I don't care what anybody thinks. Here you go. And you're going to hear it. And the honesty is so rare in the world that when you get around that person, just have a seat. My advice, keep your mouth shut and listen. You're going to learn. You're going to learn. And you're going to laugh too, because you're going to hear something funny,
Absolutely. That's spot on who she is.
Yeah,
you have her open up a gift for Christmas and it's a piece of clothing and she looks at it, this is nice, but is it supposed to be that color? Like, just like just cuts right to your core and twists the knife. It's pretty funny.
Well, I can tell you got involved in a family that's very much like that. If you haven't noticed that yet, your wife's side of the family, Brand's side of the family, is known for opening gifts and just immediately saying things that are 100% honest. They're just like, well, that's nice, but I'm not going to wear that. And you just got to get ready for that because, the honesty is so beautiful. You can't get hurt by that, But no, I think that's great the way you put that you're taking care of and how you separate mind from soul, I think is really good, right? Because the mind is like the Sudoku and the soul would be more the faith. And then the body, of course, is the movement and the nutrition. And to be able to get into the soul work, to have your soul warmed up is so important. And we do that in community. We do that in our relationships. And I think our big relationship with, in my opinion, I believe in a creator. I have that faith, and I love to go and look at its creations, and look out there and say that's just amazing that I'm part of this bizarre world that we know so little about, but I still stay curious and want to know more. When I'm in nature, whether I'm cycling or hiking around, I just look at and I marvel at the design, and I think about that in my design inside, the one that I'm stimulating when I'm working on my patients, is similar to what I'm seeing on the outside. It blew my mind one time, and I'm sure you'll know this because I know the tattoo you have on your arm that I really like, the solar system, in that you have, the theorized structure of the atom is so similar to what we see in the solar system, and that the micro and the macro mimic each other, and that we're somehow in the middle of this, electrons and protons and neutrons floating around is just, when I first saw that comparison, it was one of those, it's like when someone told me a virus isn't alive when I was a kid. Exactly.
Yeah.
You just want to take a breath and go, wow, that's too much. That's just crazy,
Oh, I love that you brought that up, that Ken Wilber, the guy I sent you his book,
Mhm.
a part of his philosophy, his theory is things called a whole line. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've heard of that. And it's kind of the macro and the micro are similar, where there's no such thing as a whole and there's no such thing as a part. There's only a whole part. So you can't separate these things. It's also interwoven that you have to look at it as this huge, intricate design. I guess there's no separating it.
Yeah. And to be connected within that, I think, and be part of that, the flow between those two, between the macro and the micro, because then you really are, in a sense, connected. When people talk about meeting someone, they felt an instant connection. That idea of being connected, whether you're connected in a sport or in a community, it's such a beautiful thing. Humans are by nature communal, and we know this because of when you look at somebody who's suffering mentally, with the amount of mental illness in the world right now, it's so hard to watch. And so much of that is they're disconnected. They really don't have a connection that they feel. I was on Twitter for a short time because my daughters were on there, and I was kind of going to follow them and spy on them. And they knew it, of course, right? Like I would never be able to pull off a secret online spying device or whatever. Anyway, so I couldn't believe the level of negativity. And I thought, wow, maybe this is why people are struggling, is because you say something and then you're attacked at such a high level. How unhealthy is this? It's unnatural, because no one would say that to your face. Out of either fear or politeness, you would never say that to somebody, because you'd be concerned about, I don't know, being attacked physically maybe, or it's just so rude and unnecessary that I can't believe the tweets. I mean, it's just it's unbearable. But so I got off of that thing, you know.
That's the right move. Many years ago.
Yeah, I just got a little fascinated for a short time, it was a couple of years ago, with some of the social media things. I've been on Facebook forever, but yeah, that seems more controllable. At least the people that I'm friends with, we just, put funny things on there. Once in a while, little hints at political stuff. And then we share a lot of, with this virus going around, we shared a lot of information that way, back and forth. So that's been fun and helpful, and it's, learning experience, and it's communal. There's something nice about that. But it's just really strange. But let's get into
sorry, best information from your science posts. So keep me up to date when you send me those messages. Like, oh yeah, I do need to read this part.
Good. I'm glad, because I try to be thoughtful when I pick something out. Think, okay, this looks heavily researched. This is or this is the unpopular opinion that comes from somebody very intelligent. And we should probably read this right now, because there's more than one voice out there about what's going on. And a lot of these voices are being muted by powers that be.
For sure.
One of the things that's always interesting, and I get into conversations a lot with my patients, is how often somebody should be adjusted. A good portion of chiropractic patients come in pain. You work on them, the pain goes away, and then they feel like, well, this is all I need. And if you express otherwise, sometimes you feel like maybe they think you're just, keeping your practice busy, and you're really not doing it for the betterment of them. And other times they sort of split the difference and going, well, it makes sense that I probably had a problem before I hurt, and let's get that completely out of the body. And then you have people that are more like, if it isn't broke, I don't want to fix it, right? So in your heart of hearts, when you're adjusting a patient and you are looking at somebody, how do you decide the treatment frequency for somebody? What are you looking for?
We use insight scans here. I don't know if you're familiar with those. It's a combination of HRV, thermography, and surface electromyography. Those we use heavily to decide what the stress pattern is and how deeply rooted it is in their nervous system. So that a lot of times will tell us the frequency right away. But in my heart of hearts, I would say whenever you're subluxated, come and get in. And how do you know if you're subluxated or not? You come see a chiropractor, right? But that's kind of a bad answer to give people, I think, because I don't know, it's not that great. So I like to give analogies to people. How many times you have to brush your teeth? How many salads do you have to eat before you're healthy? It's the same thing. It's this idea of switching chiropractic from a pain-based model to more of a lifestyle. If you want to, stress is not going to stop. Stress causes our body to adapt. And when there's too much stress and our body can't adapt to it, we end up getting subluxated. We get these stagnated patterns in our body that need to be removed. So if the stress is never going to stop, how can we optimize your adaptability so you can continue to live the best life you have? And if you think that your frequency, in order to support you through that, is once a week, I mean, that's better than nothing. But I choose personally to get adjusted at least 2 or 3 times a week, just to make sure I'm at my full expression.
That's absolutely true. One of the things I tell people is that you can oftentimes know that you're subluxated, that your back's out of position or not moving right, because you feel tired, stuck, or obviously in some discomfort. Unless you're using some kind of technology to really assess that, whether it be the technology of the human chiropractor's hands, right, feeling those tonal differences and those distortions, the leg lengths, the pelvic positioning, all that kind of stuff. You really don't know what's happening. And, I try to give analogies that oftentimes diseases are about 2/3 of the way into you by the time they become symptomatic, even on blood work. So we want to be able to get ahead of the game. I mean, to truly be preventive. And I also put in there that, you know, I'm sort of a health coach to patients to one degree or another. Some people, they come in there and you're just, oh, Dr. Mike, I gained 10 pounds. I haven't seen you in 6 months. You gotta wake me up. You gotta tell me what am I doing? What's wrong with me? I don't know why I'm doing this. You know, and then I remind them, you know, of what their pattern might be emotionally, because let's say I've known them well, or I'll tell them, you know, why have you stopped exercise? And they'll say, well, I don't have the time, or I don't have the energy. And when they say time, I hit them pretty hard. I'm like, well, what are you taking up your time? What are you doing? You know, give me 24 hours, what you're doing with 24 hours. Okay, let's take 8 out for sleep. What are you doing with the rest of those hours? And when you hear, they just kind of grin, because they start to think of the useless things that they may be doing, the not so productive things, or the counterproductive things that they're doing. Sure. And I'm thinking, okay, so you have the time. Let's get rid of that one right now. You just proved to me with that smirk that you have the time. So you're saying you don't have the energy, you know, and if I don't have the energy to work out, I work out and then I get energy. Okay. Now I don't come down into my weight room on fire, ready to squat 400 pounds every day. I come down to my weight room going, wow, today I'm wherever. And I start the workout. I might have to start mild to wake myself up. I might have to wake myself up emotionally, physically, in some way. And then once things start going, then I start reviewing why I'm down here. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this to get my body to mimic nature again, to be back into nature. I'm a physical being. We all are physical to different degrees. And I know that to slow the aging process, to keep myself intellectually and emotionally put together, I have to engage in nature, and nature engagement is physical. Mother Nature's got a lot going on, right? I always remind people that, you know, early man had a sharp stick, the body of an Olympic athlete, and probably a genius IQ. This idea that a caveman's this ignorant thing that's making funny grunts is absolutely, I think, inaccurate, because if you didn't know what you were doing, how are you going to survive in nature? I don't care. You can take somebody with a 240 IQ right now and put him in nature, and if they haven't spent time out there, they'll freeze to death, slip off a cliff, starve to death, get an infection. It'd be unbelievable, right? And they'll figure it out faster than someone else because they have a 240 IQ. But at the same time, they don't know what they're doing. And for me, I want to make sure I keep that awake, you know, keep that physical body awake. So there's how I work out. So if I share that with someone monthly, because they do their monthly adjustment, let's say, I can keep them on track. So my job is to teach, because I'm a doctor, and doctor means teacher, and to lead by example. I don't come into my office overweight. I don't come into my office looking sickly. I want to live by example. And, you know, I love when I get caught in the supermarket by a patient and they look in my cart, right? I love it. I just love it, because they want to know, is he telling the truth? What's he got in there, you know? And they're not going to see Twinkies in there, right? Dr. Fred Clary liked to talk about his Twinkie eating patients. And, you know, and then if they look in my cart, I might look in their cart and they have a little commentary jokingly, right? Just like, oh, what are you can do with those? You know, and, but, you know, it's nice to be able to live by example. It's not always easy. It's getting actually easier. I think because of age, I notice things that I do wrong more. I just feel it a little deeper. I don't know if it's living cleaner for longer or age or what it is, but I can tell that, you know, that wasn't a good choice. You know, one of my weaknesses, I only have a couple at this point, are chocolate. And if I overdo that, I can kind of feel that in me, you know, the sugar rush and maybe the dairy product in there or whatever, you know, they're throwing into chocolate. What is it? Cockroach saliva, I guess, is naturally found in chocolate. Isn't that wild? Yeah, and I guess it's some of the reasons you're allergic, or people are allergic to chocolate, is actually the cockroach saliva is a really strong allergen to humans. Isn't that wild?
If you don't remember anything from watching this, people are going to definitely remember that. That's
exactly.
going to be it.
That's a take home. People can look that one up. It's very true. Some people are just the cocoa bean, you know, but other people, it's where these beans are harvested. There's lots of roaches running around because very warm climate, and they get their saliva all over the place, I guess. Pretty wild. So
But you're spot on though. The congruency is key, right? You can't be preaching one thing in your office and then them seeing you at the grocery store or the McDonald's line the next day. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't work out that way.
Yeah. And I am always challenged when someone wants to live a healthy life and doesn't really want to do the things it takes, and it,
Mhm.
like I say, the starting it is tough, converting your body over to a healthier lifestyle. It's an uphill thing, right? And you need the energy to do it. So you got to get it in the right order. I always tell people, baby step it at first. First, we're going to do is guzzle water. I'm going to wash that body out. Then we're going to get some fiber in you. We're going to scrape it out. It's going to be cleaned out. I love diatomaceous earth as a fiber source. And then we're going to start adding more healthy foods and more healthy foods. Some people are all or nothing. Like Dr. Fred Clary, he's all or nothing. When he decides to do something, he just throws everything out and he starts it. His adrenaline goes through the roof and he starts roaring around and then he does it. And it's fun to watch. I'm not exactly that intense. I'm more intense. When I fall for something, when I fall in love with something, I do it, almost like that. But he's at the next level, which is always fun. Other people need to just baby step it, and I'm fine with that. What's more your nature? If you find something that you're really into, like you got me back started on using turmeric in my cooking when you were over the house one time, and
Curries,
I
curries.
haven't quit that since. I had it this morning. I scrambled it up in my eggs with black
So
pepper
good.
to get that curcumin out, and I had a great omelet this morning with kale and everything. But are you more of a, once you see it, you go nuts on it, or are you someone who baby steps things in and is more careful about it?
I'm a little bit of both. I think for me, the sustainability is I need to find the balance.
Hmm.
But my gut reaction, my knee-jerk reaction is to just dive in. Like especially with books. I found Ken Wilber and I read 15 of his books in a row within a couple months. You know what I mean? It's just like I want to know everything because I find knowledge in it. And
Hmm.
then after that initial kind of mayhem, that's when I try to implement more steadily. Be like, how is this going to be sustainable for
Okay.
me? Um, for instance, like I do Ramadan every year. So I'm kind of all or nothing with that, where I'll go from binge eating to all of a sudden, all right, I'm not going to really eat for a month. Like my body kind of does both things. It's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
as far as long term, I definitely recommend, unless you're a Fred Clary, to try to do baby step implementation.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
I think you're right. Most of my patients, I don't recommend them just doing something in a cold turkey fashion, because sometimes it just creates such a shock. They just surrender and give up. And somebody that's not real passionate in general is exhausted, maybe mildly depressed, to conjure up the energy to push up against such your body's parasites, for one thing, whatever else resistance is stopping you from eating the right foods and making the changes in your physical activity. I think you really want to make sure that you're baby stepping that in. That's my advice to people. Make
Yeah.
make a change. I think I said
And
in one podcast, I think I said something along the lines of that: if someone is really wiped out and they can't make the changes and they're really in a depression, to say, what's the smallest thing I can do today to get me towards my goal? So set the goal and say, what's the smallest thing? And then maybe tomorrow do something a little bit bigger. And obviously the opposite approach is to take massive action, but that takes a lot of energy. That takes a tremendous amount of energy to be able to pull that off. And that isn't what most people are dealing with when they've been sick for a while. When they come and see us, sometimes they're really, it's been years of failing health, and they're looking to us to guide them and in a sense, baby step them, right?
yeah, it's too easy when you go all in or nothing to be more cruel on yourself. If
Mhm.
you're all in and then you slip up once, it kind of feels like a failure. But if you're
Yeah,
baby stepping, it's easier to be kinder to yourself and be like, all right, well, one more baby step here, and you keep growing.
absolutely. Another question I have for you is regarding fear. People have their fears, and they may fear healing because it means they have to take up responsibility. I had a patient one time that came in and she had every imaginable thing wrong with her. And everything I told her, she had some reason that it wasn't going to work. And she either tried it already, or she just thought it was too hard for her, and everything. And her brother-in-law was also a patient. And due to confidentiality, I couldn't really say much between the two of them. But he goes, okay, you don't want to tell me what's going on with her, and I understand because I already know what's going on with her. And I said, okay, well, I guess you could share that with me. That's not a breach. You're telling me, I'm not telling you. And he said if she ever was to heal, she would have to get back on with her life, and she doesn't want to. He's known her for years. I believe she was divorced from his brother. He did like her. It wasn't like he had some real animosities, but he definitely was a little, I think he was trying to save me from being miserable in the effort to try to help her. And which was really nice of him. And he basically said that, in his mind, a lot of people, if they heal, they have to go back to their life, and their life might not be that great. And I was able to, in a roundabout way, ask her that question. She never knew where that source came from, that idea. But it was a real genius thing to do, because I basically said, if you were to feel better, what would you do? And she didn't look happy. Most people, when you ask them that, say, oh, I'd start golfing again, get my tennis game back. I would go travel to Europe. I would do all this stuff. And she just looked at me and said, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, well, you don't have a big enough reason to get better, is how I put it. I go, I want you to have a big reason to get better. I mean, you have 2 children, you have 1 grandchild, wouldn't it be cool to go on a trip with them or be really exuberant around them? And, and it kind of made her realize, okay, now I think I'm approximating where she's stuck. Her spine was, of course, stuck. She was actually all kyphotic, hunched over because of the covering, that reflex to protect your heart. You often see that, posture and attitude are so related, right? I love the idea that aeronautical terms, that posture meant or attitude, meant the way the plane was coming into the ground or the way the boat was coming into shore. That was the attitude of the ship or the plane. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? That attitude and posture were interchangeable. One was assigned a mental condition and one was assigned a physical presence. And and how often do we see people when they walk into a room? We know a lot about them before they speak, by the speed at which they walk, the depth of their step, the way they breathe, where their head is over their shoulders, how far their shoulders are back, and then all the expressions on their face. So attitude and posture being so related, I thought, I'm working on her posture, but I got to work on her attitude. And that really opened up a lot. She did a lot better after that, because I kept saying, okay, so what are you going to do when you start feeling better? And then a couple of days she'd have a bad day and say, well, I don't think I'm going to get better. I'm like, well, I think otherwise. I think you need to heal on all these planes. I'm working on one, and some of that's up to you. And you're going to see patients like this, and they're interesting, right? Because they want to heal, but they're stuck in something they're not aware of. That being sick is actually more comfortable than being well. Seems crazy, but it's not crazy. It's common.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love your question by saying, because we have goals in our thing, and most people put goal number 1, I want to get out of X pain.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not a goal, right? That's a stepping stone to get to your goal. Exactly what you said. Once you're out of pain, what does that mean? What does that mean? And that's where you start getting really into the guts of things, people's whys, and why they want to be there. But they get addicted to whatever type of situation they're in, whatever that may be. They get addicted to feeling like a victim. They get addicted to being the person with a bad back. They get addicted to all these things that it's hard to break those patterns.
Yeah, and I've seen it build in different ways. You see someone who had a vital life, everything was great, and they get in a bad car accident, or they have a stroke, and they're having a real challenge, and it's taking so long to get better that they built sort of a comfortable existence around their illness. Yeah. And they almost are stuck there. It isn't, and they don't really realize that they're going to have to let go of that comfortable existence to go to the next place to heal. Mm-hmm. And that might mean, asking for less help from people around them. It's not easy, because you think, okay, I have X, Y, and Z conditions. They're pretty bad. I need people's help. And yes, you do. You need people's help to a degree, but to what degree? When are you going to take the training wheels and raise them up a little bit and try to ride that bike? Ride the bike with a little less support, and everybody knows that a parent can be too much. A parent can overparent. You can helicopter your children, right? And then they're 25 years old and they're still in your basement. And why are they down there? What are they doing down there, right? you never really took the training wheels and said, okay, you got to ride a little more now. It's your responsibility. This is more you. And it comes out of love. And when something comes out of love, boy, that's a tougher one. When something comes out of something nasty, it's a lot easier to identify and let go of and point out. But, a super loving spouse, child, parent, is such a beautiful thing. But when is it tough love? When you need to back off? Those are questions I bring up with some of my patients, and it's an uncomfortable topic because sometimes they get angry with you because they're like, you're telling me that I should be better and I just can't, And, I really am careful before I say that, because obviously some people there are parts of them that are never going to heal. I don't like to bring that up because I don't want to remove hope, but at the same time, sometimes that's just really true. But then what part of you can we heal? What part of can we get you closer to the goals like you're talking about? You make a great point saying getting out of pain isn't, a big enough goal. It's a tiny thing. To get yourself out of a situation, you need power.
Yeah. And to have those tough conversations with people, you really need to have that relationship like you're talking about. You can't just go up to someone off the street and, cut them deep like that, because they're not prepared for someone to hit that level at quite yet.
Yeah.
They've been holding on for too long, and they don't have the capacity right there. One of the questions I love to ask people is to see kind of where their head's at on the scale of where their locus of control is ask them, where does health come from? Because in today's society, it cultivates this idea that health comes from external things. And it's not there. If you think health is coming from an external thing, you're never going to heal, because you're always expecting someone else to carry you over the hill or wherever it is. And like you said, we need help from other people, but the healing comes from the inside. So where does health come from? Kind of gets people noodling on, I don't know, maybe it can empower them a little more to find out where true healing does originate.
You make a good point. You make a very good point, because healing is a mystery. Oftentimes it's a fascinating topic to get into. There's a book called Healers on Healing. I don't know if I mentioned that to you in the past. Yep. They took each very profound professional in the healing arts and asked them basically, why do people heal? How do they heal? Why don't they heal? And get into what is the common thread about healing. I've always been fascinated with the book because George Goodhart's in there, the beginner, the founder, the chiropractor who invented applied kinesiology or brought it to its fruition. But I think it's so important that we are respectful, but at the same time, maybe lovingly confrontational at times. Because you think about a healer. If someone says, imagine a healer, you might picture someone in a white flowing cape, who's got a big smile and is just saying wonderful things. And certainly that is one version of a healer. And that is the type of person that a lot of people need. And then there's people that, need sort of a tough love approach. They might need some mild scolding or, awakening to the truth. And that truth is uncomfortable. The truth hurts, as they say, right? The truth will set you free, however, right? So to get free, is it painful? It can be. If you're imprisoned and you want to get out of it, think of a prison. It's painful to get out of a prison. If you're unjustly imprisoned in something, let's just say not an actual prison, but in a situation, to get out of it, you might have to run with hardly any clothing on in the wintertime to the nearest shelter, and then spend 3 days there, and then run to the next place, and then find some shoes, and then work your way out of that imprisoned environment. And all of that is exhausting and painful and difficult. But as you get more and more free, you start to get some energy, and then pretty soon you're healed and you're in a new place. And that kind of, if we can bring on that in our patients, those kind of analogies. I always thought a great chiropractor was also someone who had a great mind of philosophy. And that's when I first met you, that's the first thing I picked. One of the bunch of stuff I picked up on you about you was that you had a very philosophical and a deep mind. And that also so pleasant to talk to that you could say something that, and you wouldn't have to worry about being attacked. And I think that's one of the things that makes you a great chiropractor, is somebody could say almost rude or crass things to you because they feel like they could get away with it. And you might think that that's not a good thing, but that's a wonderful thing, because then you're going to have people say what they really feel. If you were terrifying and ferocious, it might be hard for someone to say something tough to you because they'd be afraid of your wrath. but the fact that you're a peaceful, loving person, they could say something kind of nasty. You know, I love when someone in my office, one of my patients tells me something they don't like about my office. You know, it's almost always someone who is a little more ferocious than me by nature. You know, and the people that aren't as ferocious as me, let's say, to use that term, would never want to bring it up because they might think, oh my God, I don't want to get this guy mad. You know, he maybe he's a little dangerous, but someone way more dangerous than me could easily say to me what they want, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm going to hear the truth, and I'm going to hear something constructive, even if it's, you know, even if it's said to maybe to knock me off my horse a little. If it's true, it's true. Whatever the motivation is, it's always nice when the motivation is pure love, but sometimes it's something else. But you know, you're still going to learn from it. And to me, that's all
Absolutely.
equations. Like today's talk, I think we're talking about what heals people, right? We're talking about the history of chiropractic and how that healing, you know, how that healing art grew into what it is today. And your appreciation for the beginnings of it is less common, I find, in younger practitioners. Do you find that? Do you think you're, in a sense, an oddball, that you love the history and philosophy of the real profession and its roots versus some other odd way of looking at it?
Yeah, I mean, that gets into a whole nother topic about how the schools are teaching what they teach. And, you know, that's a whole rabbit hole. But I think overall, students aren't exposed to it. I
Okay.
was very oddly introduced to chiropractic, where the principled end of it is where I started and didn't know a different way, where most of the time people come into it from a PT background or they wanted to be an MD but couldn't get in. So now they're applying for chiropractic school. And that's just a whole different avenue coming into chiropractic than it is. So to really appreciate the history is definitely unusual. I think.
Yeah.
I think, but I don't know, to no fault to whoever the student is. A lot of times it's an exposure issue.
You make a good point, because when I first started chiropractic care, I knew it was back pain and headaches, and that was enough because it worked so well for me. And off I
Yeah.
went. And then I realized that I started to read the philosophy, and then the educational experience. For people who don't know, Dr. Kevin and I went to the same school, separated by about 20 something years. And it was interesting for you to tell me, how similar your experience is, that time really hasn't changed how students feel about the school. And I think it's a shame that more time isn't spent on the true philosophy of chiropractic, and it gets lost in sort of being watered down into, we used to jokingly call, and if you heard this term, metapractors,
Oh, yeah.
which were chiropractors that practice more like medical doctors than chiropractors. And we certainly need our medical doctors, but I don't think we need a washed out version of a medical doctor that's half of, you know, the jack of all trades, the master of none. You know, I think we have to respect and understand when to refer to a medical doctor, obviously, but at the same time, share the richness of this profession, give them the philosophy and the lifestyle. You know, it's like if you went into a yoga class and they started powerlifting halfway through yoga, you'd be like, what am I doing here, right? What is going on? I thought I was in a yoga class and this guy's powerlifting. That's what I think happens with these terms we call metapractors, which I don't mean to insult anybody, but you know, be a chiropractor and figure out what that is. If you're, and especially if your practice isn't doing well, there's most of the time that's why you're not really being a chiropractor. Because when you're a real chiropractor and you do it and say it the way it's meant to be, backed by research, by the way, I'm not saying go back and practice a fumbling thing that doesn't have any validity. When you practice it according to research and philosophically and extrapolate from there, you got to extrapolate a little bit. I mean, people don't realize this, but I read an interesting stat that medical procedures, 20% of them were backed by scientific validation.
I saw that.
20% of medical procedures, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard a number that low?
It's crazy.
Yeah. So
That's
if that's
crazy.
the case, how much research does everybody need to practice what they do? And that's a whole nother topic. How much time and money is there for research before you can actually practice something? I was watching an ER show years ago, and he basically said, watch one, watch one, do one, teach one. In other words, when they were giving people instruction on how to do some of the ER procedures, they were saying, hey, here's how it's done, watch this. And then the next time that came in, that person was responsible for doing it Now, obviously, you have an educated person here. You have a doctor in the residency.
Yeah.
You have a very, a person with a lot of skills, but they might not be that skillful in that one thing. So watch one, do one, and now you're capable of teaching one. And they were probably being a little facetious. I hope it isn't that much of a fly by night or shoot from the hip type of thing. But maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not entrenched in that world deep enough to give a good opinion on that. But I think that that it's important that you do this profession in the way it's meant to be done, and know the philosophy, know the founders, know the great men and what they had to say. And I respect you for doing that at your stage of the game, coming out of the gate with that kind of philosophical basis. People come to chiropractors for another opinion. They don't come for the same opinion. They come for a different way of doing it. And I think that the misconceptions can be that we're not doing the right thing, but what we're doing is the other thing. And that's what people want. People want alternatives. They've already done the classic and it's either partially worked or hasn't worked. And they're coming to you for that other thing. So do that other thing well. That's my advice to all the chiropractors out there. From my years in practice, those are the guys that were successful and had great relationship with their patients. They were doing chiropractic as it is meant to be. And if you don't know what it is, start opening the old books, right? Look at that first, and then work your way up to what we've now seen.
Yeah, know it, own it, find out if you love it. If you don't, do something else, because there's a million other things that you can do to spend your life on vacation, like me and you are doing. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So give yourself the effort and the opportunity to actually get to know what you're doing and find out if it is you or not.
Absolutely. Well, Doc, this has been great. If you have anything else you want to throw in, let me know. But I'm just thrilled to spend some time with you as always. Every time we get together, it's always awesome. I think some of the people around us might just go, wow, look at these two. How are they so similar? They come from different areas of the country and everything. But I think we share maybe some genetics. Who knows if we went back far enough? But we certainly are so like-minded that it's cool to have a brother in this thing. Like my other people have been on this podcast. It's been really exciting. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for spending time with us. Yeah. If you have any books, anything that you'd like to shout out to somebody, let me know. Is there something that you think, boy, that book changed my life, or that book would be good for the viewers of this podcast? Which most viewers of this podcast are going to be people that are yearning for more. They want to know what's at the next level of health. That's who watch. Anyone's going to sit through an hour to 2 hours worth of me jabbing away really wants to learn how to get to the next level and be ultra healthy, whether it be mind, body, spirit. Even if you have to name a couple of books. You mentioned a couple authors earlier.
Yeah, wow, that's big. First of all, thank you so much. It is always awesome just talking to you. I appreciate it so much. I love you big. That's very nice. But books wise, let's just throw one in. David Hawkins. Have you ever gotten into him? That's the one maybe I'd dive into. Start with Power versus Force and finish the trilogy.
Yes.
I just recently found out Power versus Force is a trilogy. I did not know that. So it goes
Power. I didn't know that either.
So he has a multitude of books, and it goes Power versus Force, then Eye of the Eye, and then I.
Okay.
Mind-boggling. If you want to get into the depths of, you want to throw your scuba gear on and figure out some depth, I'd read those books.
Yeah, and Power versus Force. Yeah. Amazing.
Unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable. Okay. So that's probably it. But books are tough to recommend because they're so personal. But I'd say David Hawkins.
Yeah, okay. I'm 100% with you. Power versus Force is one of the most powerful books I've read. I agree with you on that. And I was surprised that, because I do muscle testing in practice, and to understand vibration, which always fascinated me. I think we've talked in other podcasts about my love of how vibration affects matter, different frequencies, and how, matter is vibrating and life is vibrating at different frequencies, and how healing is higher vibrations and destruction is lower vibrations. And he gets into all that in that book. A lot of my talking about it is probably coming osmotically from that book that I read a few years ago. I think that book's probably 20 years old, but you read it right now and it's like it was written yesterday, right? It's still so current, which shows you how stubborn the world is to making moves to a more intellectual and a more philosophically sound way of existing and healing.
Big time.
Right.
Big time. Yeah, nailed it.
All right, Doc. Thank you once again. Thanks for showing up and doing this with us. I really appreciate it, and I plan on having a series of these podcasts, and I'd love to have you back on. We could pick another topic and jabber jaw that one around and then see how it goes. But if you to our viewers out there, if you like this, give us a thumbs up, share this with other people, because you never know who you're going to heal, who you're going to be able to help inspire with some of the stuff that we say. We're able to do that with our patients. Hopefully we can do that with the public. They can hear what we have to say and spread the news. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Stay healthy. Do the right things. We'll talk soon.